Hey, Mike, how you doing?
John, always doing wonderful when the weather is beautiful and you're in Mexico, right?
I'm not when you are. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I just spent more time than I wanted to in Canada over the Christmas break, and it made me so thankful for warm weather again.
I hear ya. Yeah, I mean, I'm from Ontario too, and coming back out to BC, I get that not quite the same effect as living in Mexico, but you come back here, you can walk around in barely a raincoat or just a sweater in the middle of winter. It's awesome. So
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to having a chat with you. I know you and I go pretty far back at this point. I've done a lot of coaching with you. It's been tremendously valuable for my business. And for me, this might even be a good place to just start it up. But for me, I was drawn to coaching with you for a couple of reasons. And I think it's part of the reason I stayed working with you for so long is that I am very passionate about entrepreneurship and business just purely because of the lifestyle opportunities that it can create and that it can afford people. I'm not really somebody who's out here trying to sell all of my time to grow something massive and so that I can just spend even more time at my desk. That's not the end goal for me. It's more of a lifestyle design ethos. And that has really dictated the type of people the type of entrepreneurs I like networking with. I'm part of a community called the DC, which is completely based around that. And it's awesome, but it's a different angle of business and it's a different angle of entrepreneurship. And it's kind of hard to find those little pockets of people. It's a little bit easier in the digital nomad community, which I know is basically something you're a part of at this point. But with that in mind, this is a platform where I'm just having conversations with people I think are interesting and good to connect with and who I want to chat with. But it's also for the mindfulness business and the mindfulness community. So part of the reason I thought this would be a really good fit is because of your focus on taking a bit more of a mindful approach to creating the lifestyle that you want and the life that you want. And taking care of, as an entrepreneur, it's not purely about grinding and getting funding and pushing through things that you hate. It's more about there's no actual rules. So how do you create something that feels meaningful every day to you? So that to me is really interesting. I think it's also a refreshing approach to entrepreneurship that you don't necessarily come across every day when you're in North America's, hustle culture. And so, yeah, I guess I'd love to, if you want to give an introduction on what you do, I know I think you're probably the best one to explain that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, thanks for having me. And yeah, we go back. We met on a beach in Mexico. So full circle back to the Mexico thing, which is awesome. So yeah, so I worked for a big corporation for 6 years. I took the job because I felt like that was what adults do, and it was secure, and it gave me a salary, and it gave me benefits. I ended up leaving that role kind of just by having like a panic attack. My brain, my body, my heart just didn't want to be there at all. Quit with no backup plan, really not an intelligent move relative to like my situation. Started a software company, which evolved into an ads company, which now I work with people because of the lessons that I've learned along my entrepreneurial journey. So I started my agency in 2013, and I had a lot of bad years, a lot of tough years, big wins, big dips. And so for me, where I'm at now, what I've realized is when you're looking outward and seeing what everybody else is doing and you're modeling your life, your business, your hobby, like if you're modeling anything based on what everyone else is doing, you're really doing yourself a disservice. And one of the things I'm really forward about in my coaching, as you mentioned, was kind of like, what do you want this thing to look like? Right. Some people love the grind of, 50, 60 hours and they love, wearing all the hats and that's fine if that's what like lights you up. But are you doing it because it lights you up, or are you doing it because you feel like you have to do it and you don't have an actual like system or structure to get away from it? If it's the latter, to take that step back. And that's one thing I talk with my coaching clients about is like, what do you want this business to even look like? Because, we can always look at our competitors and say, oh yeah, well, they're at 100 clients and 30 employees. Like, great. That's what their success looks like. Maybe they're not thinking about this either. But what I see in a lot of entrepreneurs, particularly solopreneurs, is we grab a snapshot of what someone else is doing and we're like, oh, well, I look up to them, so I'm going to just do that thing that they're doing. And we get cornered into, hours we don't like, working with customers or people we don't like, doing services we don't like. It really turns into a trap. So I do try and focus on that question first of like, what is the ideal situation? What do you want your day to look like? What do you want this business to look like? Who do you want to keep around you on a daily basis? And then build the business around that. It sounds a little crazy, but it can be done.
Oh yeah, I love it. It's such a more intuitive way of looking at entrepreneurship, instead of just, this is the roadmap to growth. You need to put systems in place. I mean, of course, systems are part of everything. And systems is something that I think I wish I had learned way before the world of hopping into trying to run my own business. I think it can really bringing that logical part to your business or just to your basic life can be so good for a variety of reasons. But I think the other thing that I'll say is maybe I'll start with an example. I talk to entrepreneurs every day. I'm at a WeWork right now. I come here almost every day. I know friends who sit on their computer coding here until midnight, and then they show up the next morning at 8:30 a.m. and they're back at it, and they love that. So fair enough, right? But there is an element of, what are we all doing this for? What are we all doing this for? And I think that's kind of where, love it or hate it, I think thinking about your life from a mindful perspective and a I guess conscious perspective of trying to think about what makes you happy and what doesn't make you happy is super important, because it's so easy to get stuck in the rat race, and you might leave the corporate world to start your business and just get stuck back in it. You really need to think about things intentionally and what makes you happy.
Yeah. Well, and I think what people don't realize as much is that like these are ingrained patterns, right? So you grew up a certain way. You watched whoever was around you raising you. You watched them do things a certain way, right? You watched their emotional and their comfort and their connection to money. You watched their habits and their patterns and their process towards work, and you modeled that and you said, oh, well, this is what my parent, caretaker, whoever it is that you modeled the world around, like that's what being an adult is, right? And so there's a couple problems with that. We don't know if they were being conscious about the way that they were operating. Did they just feel stuck and like they couldn't go and do anything else and they just did it and they suffered? Like, do we know if they even liked it? Are we stealing a model of something that made somebody miserable? Like, that's a big question to ask. And I think what happens is when we see that and then we have that imprint at a young age, that's how we understand work later. And so when we don't question it, even if we don't like it, even if intuitively we're like, I don't like what I'm doing, but you feel some level of fulfillment and productivity because you're doing that phasing, you're doing that thing that you understand as this is how the life works. And so there's this trap where you don't like it, but you don't want to leave it because it's comfort, right? It's the security. It's like, if I just keep doing this thing over and over again and I don't break the pattern, then like kind of nothing bad can happen. Like nothing can go wrong. And so I think a lot of people take comfort in modeling from what they saw. And I see it, I talk to people of all different ages. And I think where it hits a lot of people, that whole idea of like the midlife crisis, is that like, now I've taken some time to be a little bit more self-aware. Now I've taken some time to really reflect on how my energy goes, especially when you're getting older, when you're like, I don't have as much energy. And you're like, why is this thing getting my energy? And that's when the midlife crisis hits, where you're like, I don't even know who I am, what I'm doing, because I've just been following this pattern forever. So it's so dangerous. And to not have, for a lot of people, to not have that self-awareness of it, or not even know that it's a problem or a challenge. It's an unfortunate situation, but you see it a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, this reminds me of we were talking about this right before we started hit the record button, but and this is my experience too. Limits are almost always self-imposed on yourself. And, we've talked about this a zillion times. For me, it often was pricing limitations. Like, I can't charge a price like that. Who am I? Like, how am I supposed to do that? And you were always pushing me to kind of reframe the way that I see things, just kind of emphasizing, hey, it's about value. It's about what are you doing for these people? You're making a huge impact for their business through something that's one of their biggest line items every single month, one of their biggest expenses. And reframing that is so hard when you don't have a process or something to challenge you. And coaching for me has been priceless in that way, but also in that way, I see a lot of similarities between, there's all kinds of different types of coaching, right? I know people who are just purely, they just call themselves coaches. They basically just help people work through whatever they're working through. Then there's people like you who have a little bit more of a niche down approach of, this is who I help and this is these people, and I help them get to here. And I guess it's always going to be different from therapy and counseling, because you are there to push people and question them and not make them feel bad, but kind of help them completely reframe it. Do you see similarities between, because for me, sometimes it would feel like therapy talking to you, just because I just need to process things out loud. And sometimes it would just be me figuring it out as I'm saying it out loud, because I have studied this stuff for so long, especially through all my mindfulness education, of like, that's a made up story in my head. That doesn't actually mean anything. But sometimes you need to hear it from someone else, and that is so useful.
Yeah. So I think, and I hear that often, like, hey, I just sent you this 5-minute video. Like, it was just me venting. Like, I just needed to get it off my chest. The truth is, there's a couple pieces of it. One is entrepreneurship, specifically like solopreneurship, where we're like, single owner operators. There's no partners in the business. We bring on some freelancers and some people, but like, when we don't have a peer to talk to bounce ideas off of, to validate our thoughts, to validate our ideas, you get into this headspace of like, okay, well, if I do this, then this happens and this happens, but what if that goes wrong and that goes wrong? And it's very easy to like talk yourself out of stuff. It's very easy to stay stagnant when you don't have that like peer-to-peer ideation, or someone whose judgment that you trust to bounce ideas off of. So I think whether that's a peer-to-peer business group or a coach or whatever that is, I think it's really important when you are isolated and you are responsible for everything and you're wearing all the hats. I think people don't really acknowledge like how stressful that is. We go out into this thing, we're like, I'm going to build this thing and it's going to be great. I hear it all the time. And that's why I don't work with people in their first few years who haven't built an established offer yet, because typically what happens is you go out full of piss and vinegar. This is going to be great, everyone's going to buy it. 6 months go by, you've messaged 1,000 people, everyone said no or completely ignored you. That's when most people leave, right? And then the next trap is like a year to a year and a half in, you're like, okay, finally some people said yes, but like, I'm doing a lot of work, this is really exhausting. Like, if someone leaves, I'm screwed, because I was conserving all this money in the first 6 months where I couldn't get anything going. Is this what this is going to be like? Am I going to have to do every task all the time and be responsible? Like, people will then, the ship goes out of the sails. And for a lot of people, the motivation goes out and game over, right? And so, that's why I like, people kind of in year 3 to 5, you've already gone through the ups and downs. You've already shown that, hey, I've got the perseverance. I'm going to make this happen. And there are people obviously that can help you in those earlier stages with whatever it is, your original packaging of your service or lead gen or whatever the case may be. I'm saying there are resources for that. But I find that is such a volatile time. And for people that reach out to me for mentorship, not specifically coaching, whenever I have the question, I'm like, well, they're like, oh, cold outreach doesn't work. I'm like, cool, tell me more. well, I emailed like 150 people. I'm like, cool. I will help you. I'll give you an hour or like 2 hours of my time and I'll break this down for you after you've emailed 5,000. Not 200. Get to 5,000. And if you haven't gone through, fixed some stuff, changed some stuff, generated any conversations, but you've gone through the effort, then great. I'll give you 2 hours of my time and we'll dive in. But most people, like, they don't have it in them, or they're their own worst enemy in that the negative self-talk. They get down on themselves. They get into this spiral and they're like, I guess I just can't do it. I guess it's not going to work. And so, it's a dangerous game to play when you're responsible for getting the attention, getting people to say yes, getting the money, doing the work. That first little bit of time is real tough.
Mm-hmm. I can even think of, it never ceases to amaze me how you can be the most competent person at something, but you're going to miss things. And, if there's one thing I were to say I'm very competent at, it's ads, and Google ads in particular. And my team catches things all the time that I don't see, or just another idea. There's so many ways to think about any given situation. And running ads and marketing is very creative work anyways. So there is a lot of creativity, and that alone I found is super useful when it comes to trying to build something by yourself, is having someone like you or a sounding board. It's much better when it's somebody who knows a lot more than you, and somebody who has been through it and has seen people charging. They've seen it all, right? You, for example, have a lot more clients than just me. When I was working with you, and you can draw examples from people who are charging significantly bigger retainers than me. So you can look at it just objectively, going with kind of from an influence of somebody who's bringing more to the table. And that is priceless. It's kind of in a lot of different ways. I think one of the ways is just the influence of, I remember I heard a stat recently that if you spend time with people who are high achievers, the more time you spend with them, the more likely you are to become a high achiever too. So it's having a sounding board is priceless. Being able to talk to people who are living in a life you want to, or who know how to get there, or who can influence it in a positive way. Those things are not necessarily super tangible of like, this is exactly what you get from working with someone, but it's priceless what you get from that type of stuff. Like, we're humans, and we absorb our thinking habits from other people.
Yeah. And I think what I've just seen universally, like, I have someone who, like, I occasionally I actually bring people into my space and work with them on, like, tighter deadlines. I have someone that's living with me for 2 weeks and we're building out his consultancy. So it's like, 8-hour days. We're going in. He's built and sold 2 large branding firms in Toronto. So he's had like big staffs. He's exited, got a nice house in Toronto, all that stuff. And he still has like the craziest imposter syndrome about someone paying him for him to like listen to their challenges and like give them guidance. And I'm like, dude, if you sat and assessed this business for 1 hour, you would have 3 like game-changing ideas for them, and it would be instantaneous. It would be easy to you because you've lived it, you've done it, you've seen it. And similarly with you, where it was like, okay, I'm great at ads, but what we do is we're also like really nasty critics of ourselves. And this goes to the mental game. And like, I do this to myself, which is why I also work with a coach. Because what happens is I'm like, there's these 3 things that I'm incredible at. Like, if you put me in a room and ask me about, listen to an hour of a conversation and come up with a strategy for someone, my brain just goes boom, 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 puzzle pieces, game over. But I also like didn't follow up with a lead that was like likely ready to go, and they got like really offended that I didn't send the thing, and like it probably cost me $30,000 because administratively I'm not that good. So what happens is we know we're great at some things, but then we're like, but I'm so bad at like all this other stuff. And in the world of business, you're probably going to suck at 80% of the things that your business requires. That's just the truth. But when we let that go to our minds and our hearts and our souls, and we're like, oh, well, I'm lesser because of this other thing. It it affects how we present ourselves. It affects how we present our service. It affects how we charge in pricing, because we're like, yeah, I'm great at this thing, but like all these other things make me feel small. And when you think about influence on the internet, you look at the competitors with the big LinkedIn profiles and the guys running these giant ads and they're running these commercials, and you're like, well, they have it all figured out. And I'm just this little, it makes you feel small, and then it makes you play small. And so to have somebody to like make sure that you are focused on the things that you're great at and the value of those things, even just to like beat you over the head and repeat it over and over and over again, like it takes that repetition, because like all it takes is you to make one more mistake and that whole idea goes out and you're like, yeah, but I'm like this over here, right? Like it's an ongoing mental game.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that was my experience with a lot of this stuff. We could talk about it all day, but I have had a lot of calls with you, and a lot of the times I'm bringing the exact same problems to the table and the exact same, slipping into the same habits during sales calls of just kind of like a weak pitch in whatever way that might be. And we got here, so it's not like those things were detrimental. It's just part of the learning, right?
Yeah.
But
and I think it's also giving yourself grace to know that it's not going to be perfect, right? One of the things we were just talking about with the person who's I'm helping build his consultancy, he goes, yeah, but they need these 40 things to make the business work well, and I really only give guidance on 10. So if I don't take responsibility for those 30 things that I don't really know how to do, but like I should be responsible for them, or else I'm not valuable, right? And it's this like, no, you can bring value and solve one specific unique problem. And if it's a problem that impacts your client's ability to operate, make money, be sustainable, whatever the case may be, like you don't have to be every piece. You can just be one piece, and you can be excellent at delivering that one thing. And like, that's good enough. And I think a lot of people get stuck on like, okay, but I, if I did this, I should also do these other things. And if I do these other things, then this other pile of stuff comes up. And so we get in our head about like, oh, well, I should be devalued because I don't. I'm like, well, when does that stop? Do you have to be living in the guy's house running his business for him? Like, when does it stop? Right. So putting that hard line on like, these are the things I'm great at. Here's the value of those things. And then just staying in that lane and going all in.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. That's a tricky one. I can see how you'd slip into that. And I see that stuff all the time too with ads, because ads, for example, are impacted by so many things. We're talking about a branding expert right now, the power of the brand. Companies with a much stronger brand with way better design, they do convert ads way better. It's just appealing. They look legitimate, right? So they convert at a higher rate. It's just the reality. But we don't do that. And I can't go to some owner and go, hey, you should probably just redo your whole brand.
Right. Yep. But if you can make the best out of it and give them the best result based on their situation. Now, I will say, and we've talked about this a lot, like if you assess a business and like there's just too much of a mess, and you getting paid by them is like a long shot for having any form of success, then I think you shouldn't take that business on. Like I think you should not accept that customer. I see it all the time with my stuff. Out of the conversations I have, probably 60% of the people I turn away because I'm like, oh, you're looking for someone to like come in and do this for you. You're not looking for just guidance of doing it or just like having someone help oversee. And so like we have to be very careful about taking them on. And I think one thing that I've helped you with is sometimes if it's like a close call it out, say, hey, like this is the worst case scenario. These are like all the things I can't do because of A, B, and C. This is what I can do. Worst case scenario, I think this is where we're going to land from a metric standpoint. Like, would you still buy this? And if they're like, yeah, I'm willing to give it a shot, then at least you were honest saying, hey, I'm not sure. I've got an inkling. I think it can go. But I think that's where people get they get really stuck with selling, is they're like, well, I have to be the most confident and the most boisterous and promise this massive thing. I actually think you should promise the minimum. And then if they're still willing to buy with all the faults, with all the missing pieces of your service, because you're never going to have a service that does everything, then great. Now you've set yourself up for success. You haven't led the customer on. You've kind of let everybody off on a level playing field. And it's really powerful.
And by managing their expectations, really, is what you're doing. Is you're not letting them get ahead of what is possible and what could be an outcome,
Yep.
essentially.
And my secret sauce of it is like promise way below what you know is going to work from day one. You know, if we're talking about, hey, I think I can get you like a 3% conversion rate and I know full well it's going to be 8%, great. If they buy 3 and we pop up with 8, we're going to look pretty damn good right from the get-go, right? So, you know, that's also a technique you can use for client retention and client satisfaction. So I like that. It's a little sneaky thing.
Yeah, that's genius. What do you think? What do you think? You know, you're mentioning that the guy who's staying with you, who you're working with, is pretty hard on himself with regards to this is what we have to be able to deliver on, right? And I don't even know exactly how to word the question, so I'm just going to kind of try and like articulate it. But you know, for me, I um I guess struggle to give myself permission with a lot of things, for slowing down, for being pickier with who to say yes to. And there's been a lot of points throughout the journey where I, if I had to really explain how I got to where the business is now, which is a much better spot. There's better problems, I think, new problems, better problems. But I quit my corporate job running ads for a really big enterprise company and started freelancing. And I started freelancing through Upwork, basically. You know, I can go to a place where people are literally looking up Google Ads work. I was barely getting any action, so I went into hyper overdrive, working 12 hours a day, sending proposals all day, every day. And I just made it a numbers game. And that is my superpower and the most mentally unhealthy thing for me I've ever experienced. And that is what has allowed me to grow a business decently fast. You know, I think by the time I left freelancing and decided to turn this into an agency, it was about 3 years ago, realistically, like maybe 3.5 years ago. I think it was just about exactly 3 years ago, now that I think about it. That was, you know, basically when I met you on the beach randomly, and you didn't even know really what I was doing. But I have gone through that many times in the whole journey of, oh no, I lost a couple clients, something went wrong. I know how to solve this. It's working 14 hours a day. My output cranks up, it makes up for everything. And it worked, but it was so unhealthy. And it was literally unhealthy to the point where I had hormone imbalance. Like things were just felt messed up. And I got blood work and they were messed up. Like it's not really just in words about hustle culture. It really does kind of mess you up. So how do you see entrepreneurs going through that much? I personally find, like, talking about mindfulness, I'm someone who is getting better and better as I become more mature of a business owner. I'm getting better and better at knowing when I'm about to do something that I will regret, and knowing that, hey, I actually enjoy what I do every day. I don't want to wreck that. I want this to be steady and smooth for the long run instead of going crazy for the short run. And I feel like it's not something every entrepreneur struggles with, but it's something that I definitely struggle with. So I have a whole regimen of health things. You know, I feel like I do a ton of health things, basically to try and counteract the pressure that I put on myself and to have a release, to be able to escape from it, to say, I'm going to the gym, I'm going for a run, I'm going to meditate. So I guess I'm curious to know, you know, just, this is turning into a tangent, but what do you see entrepreneurs going through? What do you see entrepreneurs doing to kind of take care of themselves when they're going through that? Mental health is a huge variable in there too. So I'm just interested to hear your commentary in general.
For sure. So I'll start with a recommendation. There's a book from Dan Hardy called The Entrepreneurial Roller Coaster. And I read it after I had entered business, where for the first 6 years of my business, I never had any mentors. I had this ego that said, I'm going to be the smartest. I don't need any help. It's my way or no way, blah, 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 blah. Like, and I was an idiot. It really hurt the trajectory of my company. And so this book describes like, there's going to be ups and downs. And sometimes the downs are going to be like, you can't get out of bed for 3 days because you're cripplingly depressed because you think the world is going to collapse on your face. And what it explains is like, hey, you're not alone. Like literally everybody goes through this. And I think sometimes just knowing that like you're not alone in a feeling, when you feel like you're alone in it, it feels like way more profound. It feels like the weight of it is just so extreme, and it doesn't feel like there's a way out. And the moment you know like, oh, someone else has this experience, you're like, oh, okay, well, if they survived, then I guess I'll survive. So I think that acknowledgement and that knowledge is really important. But to speak to that same kind of concept, but what you were describing with like the unhealthy work stuff, listen, sometimes it is, as a small business, like there's seasons of this stuff. There's seasons where you are working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. You feel just like, and I've had it where like sometimes you just fall asleep and you wake up 2 days later and you're like, oh, I guess what happens when you neglect yourself for 6 months and never sleep. Like, okay, I guess that's how that's going to be. So I think, to say it's unavoidable is wrong, but to acknowledge and to be really conscientious of the fact that it happens in seasons, right? So like, that's fine if you do it, but like pick a timeline. Let it be 30 days where you're like, I got to get this back in order. It's grind time. It's panic mode. A bunch of crap happened. Like a bunch of customers dropped off. COVID happened, whatever the case may be, some big economic change. And I lost a bunch of customers. Sometimes you just need to like go at it for a month and wreck yourself. And that's okay. But I think it's the people who have a hard time separating my business's ongoing sustainable success from those actions, right? And so it's those people who never get out of that and who find themselves like burnt completely out in year 3 because they didn't take any time to step back. They didn't take any time to glide. They didn't take any time to like celebrate their wins or let a bunch of money that came in, let them coast for a little bit and get back to regulated. And so I think that's the trap, right? People say, oh, well, when I did this 14-hour a day thing 7 days a week, that's when we were successful. Therefore, success means 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they never let go. And so, I mean, even for me, I would think, I think a lot about lifestyle design as a full-time traveler, as a single guy who wants to see the world and who just loves getting on these calls and helping people. Like, I often am like, okay, well, can I get this down to like 10 hours a week? Wait, is that even healthy to work that little? Like my brain's going to stop working if I don't go. And so it's this weird balance. And like, once we find something that's functional though, and we're like, oh, this thing has equaled success, it becomes very hard to like not idolize that practice or that process or that style. And so I think that's the key. I think you gotta take that time to step out of it. And so like one of the things I thought about is like, well, what if I just like worked super hard for 6 months and then just took 4 months off and then started marketing again for 2 months to work 6 months? I'm like, why not that? Why not that? Like I've never really, I'm 39. I started working full time when I was 17. And I've never taken a full month off. I'm like, my brain goes, no. That's impossible. Like we can't do that. Fine, a week or two, but like I'm playing with this idea of like, what if I just made my nut for the year in 6 months and then just didn't plug my computer in again for 3? Why not? Right. And so I think what happens is we get a taste of, okay, this thing works, so we got to stick with it, number one. And then we keep raising the bar or moving the expectation around. And this goes back to not looking at what you want your business and your life to look like. If it's always, I'm going to make more because I can, then you never have a point where you're calm and happy. It's always on to the next team member, next 10 clients, next marketing campaign. Whereas if you just said, hey, if I was working with 50 people and they were paying me this amount and they were super happy and stayed on with me, like I could pay myself X, my team would cover all the stuff I'm bad at. And like, that'd be a great little thing to have. And I think a lot of people don't take that step back and they don't build the thing according to like how they want the rest of their time to look like. And when you don't, like I said, you get into that, well, okay, well, growth is winning and working 14 hours creates growth. And then you just go until you can't go. And usually when you hit that wall, you hit it hard. So I see that. That's what I see in a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a really interesting. Some of the things you said there are things I've never really thought about, is that you do start to see that as, well, that worked. That worked. So that's when you start idolizing that. And that's an interesting one that I'm going to have to write down and think about a bit more. What do you think about, yeah, maybe I'll add this before I ask that question, but sometimes I think, here's an example. Entrepreneurship can be have a purpose of many different purposes for people. And one of them is money, right? That's just the reality. Everyone wants to taboo and say it's not, or just kind of brush the money topic under the rug, because it is very taboo in society in a lot of ways still. But I have a number in mind for myself where I'm like, if I can get to this number, my savings, I can be virtually guaranteed a certain level of savings by the time I'm this age, just purely off of the growth of the investments and blah, blah, blah. And to me, that is enough money for me to do everything I think is the perfect year. Like, this is what my dream life could be created by. And I maybe am a little more simple than a lot of people. I like to go surfing and do things like that. You know, I don't need to have anything super luxurious to be really happy. So it's maybe not, I think it's a good goal for me, but it's nothing insane. But my girlfriend often, because I work hard, you know, that is, again, like I said, that's my blessing and my curse. I've always been that way. I was that way with sports. I was that way with snowboarding when I was pursuing sponsorship. And I can literally decide to pour every ounce of my energy into something. And that is what works for me. And I don't chill that much. If I'm not working, I'm doing something else. I'm not just sitting on the couch doing nothing. And I'm not a type A person. Like, I don't walk into the room the loudest person there. But when it comes to doing things, I feel like life is this valuable resource and it's limited and it's not guaranteed. So I don't want to sit around doing much that doesn't feel meaningful. But she thinks, and this is something you hear all the time, is that the goalpost always moves. Like, once you get to that goalpost, you'll think, well, look at me now. I got here. This is such an amazing spot to be. Like, why would I stop? You know, you almost get addicted to the achievement. And in my house, there was, you know, when people go, hey, what was your childhood like? Like, I was praised for achievement. And that's just the truth. And it was mostly through sports at the time. I was fortunate to be athletic as a kid and I loved sports. So that worked out decently well. And so that stuff, do you see the carrot? I guess, do you see the goalpost and the carrot at the end of the stick always moving for people? And part of the reason I'm asking that is because I think a lot of entrepreneurs, there's a line from J. Cole, the rapper, that I quote once in a while, where he goes, it's in the middle of a track, but he basically says, of course I'm insecure. Why do you think I have everything? Like, why do you think I tried to have everything? Of course I'm insecure. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, that kind of defines them. Like, it's like we're seeking some kind of validation that makes it so that the goalpost always moves, because it's not about that goalpost. It's about this void that you're kind of feeling that you want to get there. And I'll wrap this up, but part of the reason I want to ask this is because I think it's super valid for a lot of people. We were even talking about it at that entrepreneur dinner with a bunch of the guys here in Vancouver who are entrepreneurs and founders, and I've talked to them about it since. And you are someone who is pretty good at knowing what you want and not really going, the goalpost doesn't seem to move that much for you. And maybe I'm wrong, but you've told me many times, you're like, I'm happy. I provide value to people. It feels good. I'm helping them achieve what they want to achieve. and I make what I want to make, and I'm going to work less hours and just go and live my life and travel and see the world and spend time with people. And like that's a good trait. I think it shows that you're not doing it out of a void of needing to be something to prove to yourself or insecurity or whatever.
Yeah. So let me just pop that bubble. I do it this way out of a completely separate and unique void for me. Right? I'll speak to my experience first. It is true. Like, I am a minimalist. I'm actually looking at a closet full of stuff. I was supposed to move it to my little studio in Vallarta, and I'm like, I'm just going to donate everything and get back to just having a carry-on. But that being said, along the way, if I find a cool shirt, I'm like, oh, I want that. And so they pile up, and then I let them go, and blah, 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 blah. And so, there is an element to me where I'm like, yeah, I don't need to own a lot of stuff. And a lot of people look at that and they're like, oh my God, it's amazing. And then sometimes I feel sad and I'm like, it'd be cool and feel really good right now to go buy some shit. So like, I still fill my time and waste my money on retail therapy because in that moment, I'm like, I don't know, that's just what I want. Like, I saw this pair of pants the other day and I'm like, well, I don't need a pair of pants. I'm moving to Thailand with a small bag and they're not going to fit, but I want them. So like, there's never an escape from these deficiencies, from these voids, from these whatever you want to call them in your mind. But I think here's what I know about them. So I work with a money mindset hypnotherapist called Kira Yang. I don't know if I've introduced you guys. And the way that she describes it, and I'm not an expert, so I'll just give my version of it, but there are these patterns, there are these thoughts, there are these ways that we see the world that are built in from typically inconsequential events that happen before the age of 7. So all it could have been was like this one person said this one thing to you, and this one particular topic was on your mind, and you decided in that moment, because they made fun of you or they yelled at you or this happened, that you're like, okay, well, this is now a universal truth about my life and about the way I see the world. And so I've spent the last 2 years trying to uncouple the emotion that I felt around that thing, because those things, those emotions connected to that action, shape the way that I make my decisions in my life. And so one of the biggest things that happened, one of the biggest negative things that was happening to me is I had this feeling or this notion or this truth in my mind that if it wasn't hard, it wasn't real. That was something where it was always in my mind. If it's not hard, it's not real. And there was another feeling around like, you're not the guy. You're not the guy who gets to make a lot of money. You're not the guy who's going to be popular. You're not the guy who gets rich and gets a comfortable life. You're not that guy. And wherever that came from in my subconscious, which we went back and looked at, but like those were universal truths for me. And so the way that showed up in my life is when I was running a campaign, I'd be like, okay, this is what the funnel looks like. We're going to put money in. People will opt in. We'll have some conversations. We'll get some business. But then this thing of like, well, if it's not hard, it's not real comes. And then this, you're not the guy who gets success comes in. And before we launched the campaign, I was like, hey guys, wait, hold on. Let's track this like whole random thing and let's make 40 more pieces of content. And so I would actually convolute from even getting started. I would make it so complicated that could never start. Or it could start, but like we'd abandon it 2 weeks later. And like that version of self-sabotage was like prevalent all through the first like 10 years of my business. And despite that, I still had some successes and some wins. And I made, the company did okay. But I look at that and say, well, hold on. What if that didn't exist? Like, how much more could I have achieved if I gave myself permission to be the guy that makes a lot of money and is successful? Like, man, how? And then it's a cycle because you're like, well, now I've lost all that time and that money and that energy. Well, how much time do you want to spend beating yourself up about it versus just moving forward? So, I think everyone's got their version of that. And it's frustrating because I would actually see the pattern of self-sabotage coming and I could do nothing about it. I was like, oh yeah, the last time this is what we screwed up. Okay, we got to do it different this time. And then I would just find a different way to screw it up. You know how frustrating that is? So it's funny because this self-awareness and clearing of these things brings a lot of peace, a lot of tranquility, But the problem is once you start to know about it, you're like, God, what else am I doing to myself? Like sometimes that awareness is scary because you're like, this is like an endless rabbit hole that never stops. And like once you take that lid off, you're like, I don't know if I want to get inside this container, you know? Like how much other stuff, limitations, pain and suffering I'm causing myself just because of whatever that thing was forever ago that my brain made the decision that this is what our life looks like now. So, man, self-awareness is beautiful, but it's exhausting and really frustrating at the same time.
Ignorance is bliss.
Dude, sometimes I wish I could be dumb. I'm not smart, but like I wish I could be dumber. It'd be so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, there's, there is I think there is, I'm going to butcher this. I shouldn't even throw stats around that I don't have memorized, but there is some correlation with intelligence and feeling more feelings of anxiety or depression. So like sometimes the most intelligent people are more depressed because they have this ability to be aware that they're fucking up so much. And then it almost like becomes that exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
But, Brooke back when Brooke like was running her own business, now she started not enjoying it. And she basically started working in software and UX design, more of the creative side of a technical field, which she loves. But when she was working for herself, she used to say, building a business is like like you can read a zillion personal growth books, you can watch all the YouTube stuff, but that stuff is nothing compared to getting real coaching and going to real workshops and real retreats. It's peanuts compared to that. But even the workshops and stuff is peanuts compared to starting a business. Like you are going to be confronted with everything that you have a bad habit in and everything that mentally blocks you and all of that stuff. And she was saying that because she was going through a rough time, and she was like, God, it is the ultimate personal growth. And I think it's true. I thought about that a lot. It really is. Like you just have to grow. You can no longer sit on the sidelines and be like, I'm going to read this book and journal about it and plan out when I'm going to change. Like you have to physically grow. And that's the beautiful thing about it. But man, it's hard. I think, the money mindset stuff is funny because this is where I think, again, personal growth, self-awareness, mindfulness, they're all full circle. Like you can't avoid them when you're trying to become a different version of yourself, because you have to become a different version of yourself to have different outcomes for yourself. And the money mindset stuff is often kind of lumped in with like woo woo hippie stuff, but it really is not. Like our habit is the mother of skill. Habit is also the mother of your thinking patterns. So if you're thinking about how you're not deserving of money, or how you're not smart enough, or how you're going to blow it because you don't know how to do smart things with your money, then you're going to keep sabotaging yourself. And it's really interesting. I might have to ask you to introduce me to her. I think that would be I think that topic is amazing because I feel like so many people deal with that. Like, I don't know about you. I'm a Canadian. My dad's a Canadian, and my mom moved here when she was like 9. She basically just feels like a Canadian if you ever meet her. But my dad's dad was a Polish immigrant. He comes from a really blue collar, low income family, basically. And my mom's family moved here dirt poor from Portugal. And there's a lot of money mindset stuff I inherited that I have had to think about so much. Even just risk taking to even do the business thing. There was a point where I had to tell my parents, like, bless their souls, they're just doing it out of their own anxiety. Like they think they're helping, but they're just projecting their fear onto me all the time. And I had to literally set a boundary with them at one point. Like if you keep doing that, we're just not going to have conversations as often. And it's not like I'm trying to penalize you, but you're bringing me down, and I'm already dealing with so much scary shit every day that I don't need that. So
yeah, I was talking to someone who's studying psychology. She's 21, and she has this vision of what she wants, and she's like, I don't want to be like everyone else. I don't want to go to the office. Like, I want to build something that's mine. I want to have like, I just whatever. And I said to her, like, look, do it, but know that, like, not out of a lack of love, but nobody's going to support you. Your parents are going to shit on you for dropping out of school. They might be like super mad. They might not even get over it for a long time. When you get it up and running, even though it's making money, they're going to be like, yeah, but it's never going to be good enough. It's never going to make sense, because in a lot of people's minds, getting out of the comfort and that standard living operating procedure of like, get this job, stay here, do this thing, like, it's so ingrained in people that like they have a really hard time with it. And I remember, I'll tell you a story. I remember my sister was my operations manager for a bunch of years, and my family still actually doesn't know what I do. I'm like, do you know how much content I post on the internet? Like, you could also ask what I do, but like everyone's like, I don't know, something on the internet. You're always in some country or whatever. Maybe you're a drug dealer, but and so my sister, I didn't realize she was at my mom's house, and she was on speakerphone because we were talking about taxes and blah 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 blah. And I'll never forget it. Where like I said, hey, like, who does the government think they are? What is this shit? We have to pay 60 grand in tax. And at that stage of the business, it was quite a while ago, but like 60 grand was a lot of money in tax. And then I heard my mom from like, $60,000? Wait, in tax? That's more than I make at my job. And it was like, and it was this funny realization for her of like, oh, my son like runs a business. I'm like, Mom, I employ 6 full-time people who live in Canada. Like, how do you think that this thing goes? But for them, it's like this, it's so outrageous. It's so outside of this like understanding or comfort that they like can't process it. And they're like, well, I worked this way. So like my son doesn't have that thing. It doesn't make any sense to me. And like, so I said to her, like, listen, no one's going to understand you. No one's going to support it. Everyone's going to tell you every reason it's going to not work. The closest people to you are not going to support you in the way that you want. Dude, when I started my app, I was like, hey, at least my family and friends will download it. I looked through the user logs. Nobody downloaded it. All the people that were closest to me were like, yeah, it's a stupid thing you're building. I was like, can you just create an account, please? Just leave me a review on the App Store that costs you $0. And like, 5% of people did it. So, it's, man, as you were saying, like, it's so lonely and isolating. And if you don't surround yourself with, whether it's a coach or a mentor or a peer group, it gets dark real fast.
Oh yeah. You need the community, or else you just feel, and there's a few different communities I'm a part of. Even just being here at WeWork, I'm just surrounded by people doing what I'm doing, which is really nice. It feels like I'm going to the office. I have the same people like, oh, hey, how you doing, Khaled? How you doing, Jim? And you feel like you're in your own little office, which is awesome. And you need that. But I think way before I even decided to take the plunge, and I kind of knew I was going to, I realized it because some of the weirdest people who were my friends were the ones who were entrepreneurs. And they were also doing better than all of us who went to university, much faster. And just the opposite of what my parents told me was going to happen. Like, they're friends from high school who, my parents warned me about their situation and how it's probably going to turn out or something. And we're completely wrong. So there's that. But I think I heard it from someone too. It's probably from some like big name like Tony Robbins or something, but that you have to start. I don't even think this is really about entrepreneurship. I think this is about, just look at normal society. There's an epidemic of loneliness. There's an epidemic of anxiety and depression. There's an epidemic of obesity and health issues. And you have to think differently than the average people to be happy. You have to unplug from that and be like, I like running through the forest, so I'm going to go hiking more often. It's like you have to learn to unplug from norms. And I think that's just one of the things that is the most freeing that you can do, whether you're running a business or you're a solopreneur or anything. It's if you want to be an entrepreneur, I think it's non-negotiable. I think if you want to be happy, it's also basically non-negotiable because you can't be comparing yourself to other people's norms. Like a good example is your family having their opinions about what you're doing. There are a million people who have opinions about what people are doing. And look at it this way. And this is not an original thought by any means, but if my friend who, I don't know, has a day job and it's the complete opposite of anything that I'm working towards. So he's not building a business and he's not in any field that I'm interested in. Let's say we don't even have the same hobbies. Why would his opinion have any sway on me just doing what I'm doing still? He has it's just so irrelevant. The only opinion that would even be relevant is somebody who's done it and is doing it. And they go, well, that's a weird way. Why would you ever do that? Maybe take that opinion, at least hear them out.
Right.
But
yeah. And I think people who win, and who are ahead don't actually think the ideas are crazy. They're like, I don't think so, but like, hey, I've done some weird things that nobody else thought was going to work too. And look where I am. So I think the people that are successful and open-minded that way, like kind of have a default, like, yeah, full send. Like when I coach people and I coach people that make more money than me and are more on paper successful, but I'm really good at challenging and being like, why do you want that? What does the ideal version of this thing look like? And then let's build for that rather than looking at something on YouTube or Instagram and chasing some fictitious version of someone's life. But I'll tell you, like, you're right about needing to do different things. Like the person who I wanted to be, I'll get a little bit personal here, but like the person that I wanted to be my role model was my father. Up until I was 10, I'll tell the very compressed version of the story, but up until I was 10, he was like my best friend, my road trip guy, my pull me out of school to go skiing for the day guy, my baseball coach. Like, he was my idol. Now you later learn that like he stayed in a job that he hated for 40 years because he was too chicken to like pursue what he actually wanted to do. And you're like, oh damn, that's that, right? And like he was not a good father after the age of 10 to me. He kind of abandoned his responsibilities as a father. So like those things aside, there's a lot of deep shit in there for sure. But he, then went on to remarry, focused on that other family, stayed in the job that he hated. His best stories were like these 3 things that he did in high school. Travel was always going to come next year. We'll figure it out. We'll do it another time, right? Like he was very surface level with a lot of people, didn't carry many deep relationships. And, then he died at 60, body riddled with cancer. And I watched in the last period of his time alive where like you saw how much regret he had for all the things he could have done, but just, I'll just do it next time. I'll just wait till next year. That thing's not for me. And so, I see that life, and I'm sure he had, parts of it that were joyous, but I was like, the one thing that he gave me was this motivation of like the perfect archetype of how to not run my life, what to not be, who to not be, how to not show up, right? Like I was like, oh, I just have to be like the opposite of him. And obviously that came with like a lot of anger and toxicity that like, it wasn't like this beautiful gift he gave me, right? But like, I saw that and I was like, that was a life wasted. And there were moments, and obviously maybe he loved it. I don't think so, just because of the way like the conversations near the end. But that's that whole thing. Like we only get to live once, and it doesn't get to be that long all the time. A buddy of mine who's a yacht captain who we were, in Sayulita with through COVID. He was like one of the 12 people that stayed in Sayulita. And we just had this beautiful experience together. Got the flu. Girlfriend came home from work bringing him soup, was dead. 35 years old last week, 2 weeks ago. Right. And so like, I don't know, you don't know. And so like, I would rather do the version where you're like you, where you're like, I always got to be doing something. I don't want to waste a minute. I would rather be stuck in that than not doing anything. But the in between of that is, I think, the perfect formula. But it's hard to get there.
The balance is very hard to strike, especially when you need so much focus to do challenging things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stories like that just really make you remember how fragile things are.
Mhm.
Like, anyways, what do you talking about the money mindset coach, maybe like a last couple questions.
Yeah.
What do you think are the, I know you have worked with Jack Bunce, who's another guy who I have a conversation with. Actually, you connected us and we might partner on some stuff, hopefully in the near future. But he's super cool. I know his work is really interesting. And I know you've done some coaching with him, and you obviously have a money mindset person. So I've always known you to be someone who's maybe not like a mindfulness, like meditation geek or anything, but you are always kind of doing the same thing with your own different modalities to like work on things. What do you enjoy? What do you find has really worked for you and made an impact, and maybe even like things you recommend?
Yeah. So when I'm being good, I write 2 pages a day. The last 2 months I've probably written 15 pages in total. I think it's like this forgiveness of like, hey, it's not going to be done the right way all the time. Like, and I used to be a stickler for that. Like, I was like, oh, if you miss, if you're going to do 75 hard, that 2 workout a day thing, if you miss one, you might as well just quit and never work out again because you failed. Like that used to be my mindset. I was so extreme with how I thought. And I think with age and with experience, you realize, okay, like it doesn't have to be everything the exact way perfectly every single time. So for me, I think breath work is really powerful. I think your ability to go and like shake shit up in your body and like elicit emotions and go feel even really shitty things in a deep way and like go control that experience. I think it's like better than like the ongoing nagging, dragging on bit of it that holds on to you. So like, are you willing to face it? Because it sucks. It's not nice. I don't like it. I've had like almost like panic attacks doing breath work. I get like super into it. But for me, I'm like, I only have so much energy. I know the negative impact of leaving it there and doing nothing with it. So for me, it's about like the facing of it, right? I've also worked with like an angel channeler who, not like literal, like, well, she calls them angels, but whether that's your higher self or God, whatever the case may be, but doing like inner child work and actually like going and like giving yourself the love that you didn't actually get in those moments when you needed them, like to be, your caregiver to yourself. Like I found a lot of power in that because I had many years where I felt abandoned. I didn't have anywhere to be. Like from 10 to 17, like I was, I was living with people, but like I was on my own a lot. I was really isolated. I was unsupervised in my teenage years. I was wild. Like, I was gambling. I was playing pool for money. I was selling drugs. I was out till 2 a.m. and then going to high school the next day and working 3 jobs. Like I was insane. And at the time I'm like, yeah, I'm so cool. There's all this going on. And I was like, I just didn't want to go to bed because I was like, well, then what? Then there's nothing here to protect me. Right. So I think going back and like working through those things. And I think a lot of it is like, when you're pretty young, these things get their hooks in you. And it was the same thing with the money mindset, the hypnotherapy stuff, where it's like, yeah, we got to go and like untangle the emotions you have around this thing because like that thing that happened to you when you were 5 that was really inconsequential, your subconscious has built this up into this like towering monster that's like just waiting around the corner for you, and you better not go around that corner. It's going to kill you. It's going to F you up. It's going to whatever it's going to do to you. But you have to start releasing some of that stuff. And so hypnotherapy, angel channeling, breath work are probably the 3 that I've focused on the most, to the point where I've stopped doing talk therapy. Like I don't see a lot of value in just like bringing up and bitching about stuff, and find if it works for you. And I'm not saying it as a universal truth. I'm just saying it as a truth for myself. Like I don't want to go talk about it. I want to go inside myself and like press the rewind button and like pop into that moment and like go and tackle the situation myself. Like that's how I'm going to fix this thing. So I think that is like my guiding light. Anything that like brings you back into the moments where you can either reprogram, reparent, have an impact and make a change in that moment, I think are the things that I am the most interested in.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've heard basically what you're saying with the angel channeling, which is basically the way you described it, going back and talking to your inner child. There's a name for that, but it's like a therapy approach as well.
Yeah.
One thing I will say there, I mean, that was awesome. But one thing I will say is I've had the same experience with talk therapy where you just straight up talk therapy, it just doesn't do anything for me. Like I don't know. I'm not here to say that I'm got my shit figured out, but I think modern men who are a bit more just thinking about their lives, we might not be super good at it being in tune with our emotions naturally, but we're a lot better than our dads were. Like that generation, I think we're on a different level. Just talking to somebody isn't necessarily the answer, for me at least. But I have had really good experiences with other therapists who kind of do a bit more. Like we do a bit of those things. They're a bit more like the one guy is like a big follower of Gabor Mate and his methods of looking at things that happen to you and trying to just untangle them. I like that word a lot.
Mm-hmm. And I haven't read the book, but there was this psychotherapist that was on the Joe Rogan podcast like a while ago, and her book is about how actually like continuous talk therapy is actually very bad for you. And so I'll let everybody go and decide for themselves. I haven't read the book. I haven't even watched the full interview, but the clip was she was saying something. He goes, I've never even thought about it that way. I never thought that you going to therapy and talking about the same things every single week is just making it more prevalent in your brain and more forward. Like you're just constantly pushing it back to the front of your mind, and how unhealthy that could be, where like, if you're not doing something about it and you're just talking about this, like, that's like a pretty dangerous place to be. All you're just doing is reinforcing and making it prevalent in your mindset. So that was interesting. I still want to go read the book, but I haven't done it yet.
Interesting. You're firing those neurons. The pathways get stronger and stronger and stronger the more they fire. So it kind of makes sense. Awesome. Well, this was an awesome chat. I was kind of wondering whether we were going to talk more about the business stuff, but I think this is just my perspective. But as somebody who's more in the lifestyle design type of business entrepreneurship, similar to yourself, I always have felt like mindfulness is it's almost essential to be self-aware. It's hard to do this stuff without being self-aware and being like, I screwed up in that pitch because I did this stupid thing because I didn't need to. Like you have to self-analyze. So I've always found them to be really similar, or really related. But yeah, I guess thanks for joining. This was a really good chat. I think we touched on some cool stuff. Do you have any closing notes or anything you would want to share? Or like, obviously you want to share where people can find you and follow your stuff and who you help maybe. I don't know. Whatever you think would be valuable for you.
Sure. No, I think we covered a lot. And I think, the nature of our relationship, then going into podcasting about mindfulness, I was like, I don't know if this is going to be like great or a disaster. Didn't feel like it was going to be in between, but I think it landed really well, tying in the pieces together. So yeah, it was a great conversation. I think people will get some value from it. For me, I coach solopreneurs, typically who are between 15 and 40K, who feel like they're doing a lot of work for not a lot of money. They are making money, but they feel like pretty drained by the commitment to fulfilling that work. And they know that they should probably be charging more and that what they do is worth more, but they're having a hard time unpacking it. You ever been in a sales call and you wanted to pitch more, but you didn't? So I fixed that. That's the main thing. And then there's obviously auxiliary pieces that go with it, but that's kind of summing it up. If you want to find me, you can find me on LinkedIn at Mike Moll, Moll. My website's mikemoll.co.